Hello everybody. Today I'm going to be making a video where I am installing a set of upgraded valve springs to my Ford Territory ST. This is the same engine that comes in the Australian made Ford Falcon Xr6 Turbo. I believe they come in the utility as well. The utility is just pickup shape of the car, basically built on the same platform, same engine, same transmission, and so on. So before I start, I just want to put in a small little disclaimer. I'm not doing this video or I'm not doing this as a series. I'm not opening up an official channel and doing requests or anything as yet. Also, if you do anything that I do or anything that you see me do on these videos, please note you are doing so at your own risk. I'm not holding a gun against your head and forcing you to do anything the way that I'm doing it, so please do it so at your own risk. And let me know if you learned anything from this video, because I browsed the interweb myself. I've been on the internet probably like 4 or 5 hours just looking for something or someone that has done this specific job before and maybe made a record of it, but I couldn't find any. So I hope this helps. If it does, please let me know. If it doesn't, I don't care. Here we are at the engine, obviously. So what I've done, this is because this is the Territory, it has this little bonnet scoop thing that forces air over the intercooler that used to be over the engine over here. Mine is not here anymore. I did the front mount cooler conversion to this engine or to this car. So if you've got a Ford Territory, obviously you will have to remove that, as well as the throttle over there. I don't know if that is actually 100% necessary, but it will make it a lot easier, and it's only 4 bolts anyway, so you might just as well do it. And then obviously the cover for the wheel packs have been removed. I think there's only about 8 bolts holding that cover, and then I've also loosened these bolts which hold this valve cover on. This is a bit tough to get loose. I smacked it with a mallet just on the side, gently right around, to get it loose. So if you cannot lift it with your hands, don't think, or just make sure you have loosened everything, but it's hard to miss. There's only 8 bolts on top. Then before you start, obviously make sure, first things first, let me see if I can get in there, make sure your crankshaft is lined up to top dead center. That is very important to be able to put back the timing the way it's supposed to be. And then another little thing that I forgot to mention is over here on the back of these 2 solenoids is like 2 seals that come over here. You must remove them first before moving this cover backwards and lifting upwards, because if you do not remove them, you will not be able to push this cover backwards. Okay, so this here is what you would see if you successfully removed the valve cover. Yeah, in front here, what I'm first going to be doing is marking this chain and sprockets to make sure that I'm going to be able to get them lined up again properly. Yeah, I'll do that and show you how I did that. What I did here was obviously the cam gear has already got a little indentation, so I made a mark on the chain and I made a mark on that solenoid directly across, so I can just line up those three marks. And on this side did exactly the same. Obviously with those two marks, do not have to remember the orientation between these two cam gears, as what is most important is the amount of teeth in between the two of them, top to top. So with these marks, I do not even have to count them. I will know it's correct if they line up with these marks over here. To mark, I just took one of these things out of my wife's makeup drawer. She'll probably miss it or might not, I don't know, I don't care. But this works nice. It makes really nice and visible marks on all sorts of parts. Okay guys, so I found the timing chain tensioner. It is right down there. You'll see a little spring there pushing up on a little lever, which in turn has got some teeth on the other end that hooks into the little piston down there with its own little set of teeth. What I have noticed here is that my guide, the top part of my guide is missing, which probably means someone else has been in here before me and had a hack at that. As well as there's a link down there. I don't know if you can, yeah, there's a small link down there. I see that one is colored as well, so I suspect someone's been in here and they broke that top part of the guide. But yeah, you can see the tension down there. I'm going to put a screwdriver to the back of that lever, push it backwards and see if I can push that tensioner back down and release the tension on the chain. During my searches on the internet, I came across a guy that made a little tool, something similar to this, just a flat piece of hardened metal that bent with approximately 90 degrees and then made to have a small little spike on the end. The reason for that I'm seeing now is that this tensioner is like it's really hard to put the camera in there. A little tab in front with a hole in it, which lines up to a hole on the tensioner's body itself. What I've noticed is that when you try to pick up that tensioner tab does not pick up, you first have to take some tension off the chain by pushing the chain that way with something like a screwdriver or whatever. That's probably what broke my guy down there. I suspect this engine had a broken valve spring or something in the past, and the previous owner obviously took it into the Ford dealer, which here in South Africa, sadly, lots of the so-called mechanics and stuff that work on your cars are incompetent, and they do shit like that, which is now going to which I will eventually have to fix. But yeah, that's how it goes. So basically you have to push this chain this way, push that tab on the tension down, and then push the guide back onto the tensioner, and the tensioner will slowly go back down, and then you can line up the hole on the tab with the hole on the body of the tensioner, and stick your thing in there. I said a couple of bad words and had a few conversations with myself, but I managed to get that little tool of mine in there. I cannot seem to get this camera focused to show you, but it's in, believe me. It's in. So now obviously the tension on the chain is non-existent anymore. This camshaft seemed to have moved slightly, which is probably okay, I guess, because there's no tension, pulling it back this way anymore, with the tensioner pushing on the bottom of this chain. Lets this thing turn, or tension, counterclockwise. So with the tension gone, it moved a bit. So now we'll go ahead and loosen these bolts. They seem to be like 2, 4, 6, like 12, 24 of them in total over here. So I'll go ahead and remove them. While I am busy loosening these little bolts holding the camshaft cups or retainers, or whatever you'd call them, to the top of the camshaft, I was thinking, how am I going to identify which one is the exhaust and which one is the intake camshaft? So what I did is I made a little X on the exhaust one, not because exhaust is spelled with an X, which obviously some of you will point out to me is not, but just for a reference mark. And the other thing I noticed is that there are in fact about 28 bolts instead of 24 on top here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to loosen this, let's say loosen the intake camshaft, and see if I can just maybe slip it out under this chain, and that will expose us to the valve springs. Alright guys, I've now loosened these cam cups or retainers or whatever you want to call them. I have decided to go ahead and mark these. I call this one number 1, I call that one number 2, number 3, and number 4 for no specific reason. other than to just remember where they came from. The other thing I noticed is that the bolts are different lengths. Let me just get all of them without losing any of them. So put them down here somewhere. The bolts have different lengths, as you can see there. The front ones, these ones over here, are longer than the rest of them over there. Now that I have the camshafts removed, it is much easier to get a better view at what's going on here. As you can see, I put that little pin in the two holes of the tensioner to line it up and keep it in place, and then you can see the great work that Ford did over here. Unfortunately, in South Africa, where we live, we've got this laws and stuff that decides for you or for your company which people you should and should not employ, and usually shit like this is the result of such foolishness. Anyways, so the next thing I'll be doing is I'll be removing these rockers one by one, and since I did not invest in a dedicated tool for the removal of these springs, I will be building my own tool. It's not like I'm going to use it again, because here in South Africa these cars are not very popular. They aren't made around either, and the only other place in the world that where they originate from is in Australia, where there are like hundreds and thousands of them. This is not the case in South Africa, so I will probably never have to do this job again. So I'll make do with what I can, what I have laying around, and see how successful we can be. What I have now proceeded to do is I have plugged or closed all the holes in the engine. Obviously this big one up front where the guides are, and then there's about, I'd say, 6 or so holes, oil drain ports on the right side of the engine, or on the intake side of the engine. I proceeded to plug them up because apparently if you're not using the special tools that these guys are selling, you will drop parts into your engine. So now that cannot happen. Good. The next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to now remove this roller rocker. It's simply a matter of pulling it up and out. Nothing complicated about it, or not supposed to be anyways. There we go. And that obviously exposes another little hole where something can drop into, so we'll take care of that. I'm just going to put that bolt in there, and then all our parts dropping to the bottom of the engine issues seem to be solved. So I went ahead and I grabbed my hacksaw and my drilling machine, and I made this little McGafter here. Basically, it's just a piece of flat iron that I bolted across 3 cylinders. Well, as you can see, it's about that long, and the holes are about that far apart. Obviously you're going to measure all of those, so I didn't do the effort, or didn't go do the effort to do that for you. Down here I took a tube socket, split that so that it gives me space to remove those little retaining clips on the valves. And then I just made a little rig over here. All I'm going to do is that bottom nut will be screwed outwards, and that will force the tube socket tool that I made to go down, and that will obviously compress the spring. And the other thing I did off camera was I made this little adapter to fit to my air compressor. I'm going to obviously screw this into my spark plug hole with the piston at top dead center to ensure that the valve stays up with air pressure. Obviously this is the front part of a compression tester. I removed the non-return valve that used to be inside there, so it can now blow air in that direction, which we obviously need. I will go ahead and see if I can get this first one out. It was a fiddly task, to say the least, but I got the first one out. I just put the standard spring next to the upgraded one right there, so you guys can like have a look at the difference. The upgraded one has got less turns, but it's obviously thicker. The other thing I've seen, I could never, or no place where I did my research did I come across the fact that they the springs are smaller on the one end than on the other. The retainer seems to, there's a retainer plate, spring retainer plate seems to fit better on the smaller end, so I'm going to fit all of them in that orientation. It looks like getting it back is going to be a bit tougher, but I'll just have to see. The first spring is now fully installed. It was not easy. I did use some methods which I decided not to record because of various reasons. One of them being internet roasting, and my wife might find this video sometime, and she does not like it when I do dangerous stuff. As you can see over here, it got scratched up pretty bad. So I'm going to be modifying my tool slightly, and all because this loose washer is the cause of the scratches. And I don't know if you can see that, but that thin bolt also managed to bend. So I'll be using a thicker bolt, and I'll be probably welding the washer there. And then I'll go ahead and do the rest of them on the intake side. What I have here is my slightly redesigned mechanism or tool to remove these valve springs. As you can see, I welded some nuts on the top of this flat iron here, and also made some adjustments to my little keeper, or I don't know what socket, keeper socket down there. So now what happens, this bolt just threads through that nut on top, pushes down on that socket pushes down on the valve spring, and those little things simply pop out. So it's worth it to do that little bit of extra effort to build yourself a decent tool. So I have now here modified my tool that I made for the intake valves to fit on the exhaust valves as well. I just want to show you quickly how effective it works. So just place it on the valve, check it in with the bolt on top until the spring compresses enough. And very important for this job, I found it is really, there's no better way or even other way really than to use a magnet and just snatch them up. Then you cannot lose these clips with a nice strong magnet. And then before I put them back, I just kind of rub them there on the end to make them magnetic, and then they tend to naturally stick to the valve there in those little grooves, and that makes it much easier. So yeah, this magnet is an absolute must for this job. I'm doing the one right at the back now. As you can see, the bolt at the back is completely screwed in, so which means the spring is now compressed. And the another piece of advice is to use a mirror. As you can see right here, I've put a mirror, very expensive mirror. It's about 2,000 US dollars for this mirror. Came out off an old VW Golf MK1, so it's obviously very valuable, but nevertheless, so then you can just have a look in the mirror what you are doing, and then you'll be able to see exactly what you are doing back there, because there's no other way to see back there. Remember, it has to be a very expensive mirror, such as this one, of course. All of the valve springs have now been installed. My marks are all on the original place and orientation. All the cam cups are back where they came from, and I will now be torquing these bolts to about I believe 10 Newton meters, and putting this cam cover back onto the engine and closing this stuff up. Now that I have completed the valve spring swap, I thought I would just have a better look at this tool that I made to wrap up the video. Okay, so basically what I did is I took a standard rev nut and I threaded a bolt into it at the end, and I cut it off and glued it on there so that this bolt cannot screw all the way through, so it acts as a stop. And over here I just took a standard tube socket, now welded the top shut, and I welded the bottom shut, and then I made the appropriate holes necessary to line up over the valve stem, and that gave me enough space to take out my cups or retaining clips or whatever you would call them. And yeah, so that worked really nice. I think what I have here is a 24mm tube socket, and to be honest, it is a little bit large. I would rather, if I had to do this again, maybe go with a 20mm one, and it will fit in to those tight spots much easier. So basically how it worked is, as you can see, I welded a nut onto above each cylinder. I only took 3 cylinders at a time, and when this nut was screwed in, it will obviously, or when this bolt gets screwed in, obviously it will go down, and when that goes down, it presses on top of this stopper that I made, or whatever you would call it, and then that would rotate, freely rotate on top of this other tube socket, and then the whole thing will press down onto the valve or onto the spring, leaving the valve in place with compressed air, obviously. And yeah, remove the retaining clips, screw it back out, take off this little tool, replace your spring, put back the tool, jack it back in there, put those retaining clips back in there, and that's it. So I have successfully started my vehicle, and I am very pleased with the results, and I hope I'll never have to do this again. And if you decide to do this, remember, I'm not forcing you to do anything the way I did it. You're doing it completely at your own risk, and I really hope I help someone some way. Keep well.